Good morning, you guys. Happy May, happy spring. We made it. We made it past winter. I absolutely love spring. I love the new growth. I love the warm weather. And I'm so excited for spring. But before we get into that, here is my March and April reading wrap up. Over these 2 months, I read 7 books, which is not a whole lot, but we will get into that in a moment here. But I have been trying to this year just prioritize quality over quantity in my reading and reach for the longer, heftier books, even if I may read less. And I feel like I'm doing pretty well with that so far. Honestly, though, overall, I feel like I was really getting into the books that I read and I was really enjoying reading and picking up my book a lot and choosing that over scrolling more than I maybe would normally. So honestly, it was a good few reading months. Starting in March, I finished up The Inheritance Cycle by reading Brisingr and then Inheritance. And this is why I only read 7 books over these 2 months, because this took me a long time. I talked about this series in my last reading wrap up and kind of went into what it was about, but it's basically just following our main character Aragon, and there's dragons and adventure and saving the world and all that stuff that makes a fantasy series a good fantasy series. I really enjoyed the series. I love the way that it finished up. I gave this one 3.75 stars, and then the last book I gave 4 stars. This one I think was my favorite out of all 4, and I just really enjoyed the series, and I did find myself getting connected to the story, which I have not read a whole lot of fantasy lately, so this was fun to get back into that world. The next book that I read is kind of following the Inheritance Cycle, and that is Murtagh, which is like a side story of one of the characters in the Inheritance Cycle series. I read that book, and obviously it's following Murtagh, and there's some suspicious going on in the world after Aragon saved the world and everything was solved in the Inheritance series. Now there's maybe some issues arising. In this book, Murtagh comes across a group of people that have kind of slid under the radar for a while and have been practicing their own magic and just strange goings on, and nobody has really known about them, but they've definitely been prevalent throughout the years, and basically they're a cult. And in his dealings with these people, he's discovering that they are not okay, and that he kind of needs to address these people, and it's basically him dealing with this cult, which maybe sounds kind of weird, but I really enjoyed this book. I actually gave it 4.25 stars. I enjoyed it more than any of the Inheritance Cycle books, and I was very invested, and I really enjoyed hearing Murtagh's story. And he is a gray character, which I do enjoy gray characters, and I enjoyed reading about him. So if you enjoyed The Inheritance Cycle, I would highly recommend picking up Murtagh. For my next book, my sister and I, and my sister's a big reader too, and we went to the library and we each picked a book for the other person. And my sister picked for me The Girl on the Train. And I loved this book, you guys. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I was so sad, you guys. I have been reading on the treadmill more lately, just like, because what else am I supposed to do? And you guys, I did not even notice my treadmill time while I was reading this book. I was so invested, and it takes a lot for me to not be conscious of my treadmill time. And I was so invested in the story, and it was crazy. I don't want to say too much about it because I went into it pretty blind, and I think just with a thriller, it's great to go into it knowing as little as possible. But the rough outline is that there is this woman who rides on a train every day, and she kind of spies these people who seem very wholesome, and just in her head, they're like the dream couple. They're so loving. They just care so much about each other. They're everything that she wishes she was. And then she finds out that maybe there's more going on there. And in addition to that, she has a past, and it's digging that up. It is a whole situation, and I ate up every last bit of it, and I highly recommend you read this book. The next book I read was Lord of the Flies. I have wanted to read this book for a very long time, but it's so short that I was like, I want to wait for it to be like a good filler book if I'm waiting for something. And I was actually waiting for a Libby hold to be available, so I decided to pick up this book. I gave it 3 stars. It was a pretty good book. It was an interesting read, I will say, and I'm sure most of you guys know what this book is about. It's been around for years, but if you're not familiar with it, these boys get stranded on an island, and there's a group of like, I don't know, 20 of them, and we're following kind of our main 2 boys, and there's some other bigger side characters, but these 2 boys, you see them interact, and there's maybe a little bit of butting heads, and you see that progress throughout the story. You see how civility kind of falls apart the longer that they're by themselves and the longer that they have to fend for themselves. And it was just an interesting character study. I'm not exactly sure whether I enjoyed it or not, but I did find it interesting. The next book I read was The Wedding People. This was a big book. I heard a lot about it, and I decided to give it a go. This book follows our main character, Phoebe, and she goes to this hotel to end her life. Now, at the same time, at this hotel, there is a wedding going on, and Phoebe ends up sharing with the bride her plans, and the bride says no. Like, she's just not allowed to do that because that will ruin her wedding, ruin her special day, and she has spent so much time, so much money planning for the perfect wedding, and Phoebe is not allowed to come and destroy it. So the bride ends up convincing Phoebe to abstain from her plans, and then we just follow Phoebe as she becomes more involved with the bride and the wedding and gets to know these people. It's kind of a funny but also dark book, and it does have like witty, dry humor, which I love. Starting the book, I actually did really enjoy it. I think a lot because of just the dry humor and how it felt like the author was just kind of said whatever and didn't really walk on eggshells, which I really appreciated. But as I got a little bit farther, I don't know if I loved it as much. I think one thing that drew away from it for me is, while I did like the dry humor, there was a certain level of adult jokes, which I don't really find funny. I kind of find them a little bit like stupid, but I did connect with the characters. I found it fun. I gave it 3 stars. So honestly, a pretty good read, but nothing to write home about. My last read was Just Friends. I was very excited to pick up this book. I am a big booktube person, and I love watching Haley Pham. So getting to read her book was so cool. And honestly, it was so immersive because I've been watching the process of her writing this. Honestly, going into it, I already felt more connected with this story than with some other stories. And I'm sure, like, obviously, whatever story I read, very likely the author went through the same experience. But it was just really cool to watch somebody strive for their dreams and write a book after they've been wanting to for so long, and then getting to read the fruit of that was so cool. But talk about the book in and of itself. We are following our main character, Blair, and she goes back to her hometown because her great aunt is not doing well. In doing so, she stumbles across her high school friend slash sweetheart, and we watch where it goes from there. In this book, Blair is obviously struggling with her great aunt and struggling with grief and just honestly a lot of character struggles, and I did find myself relating to some of the things that she faced, and I did find some really good quotes in this book. And in addition to that, we are watching as Blair and Declan develop in their relationship and confront some past issues. I gave this book 3.5 stars. I thought it was fine. It wasn't my favorite. Romance, to be honest, probably isn't my favorite genre. So going into this, I kind of already knew it wasn't going to be like a 5-star read. And in addition to this, it did kind of feel like a debut novel, and it did feel a little bit juvenile, but I'm not saying that in a bad way. It did just feel like that. It was a easy, fun read, and I read it outside as it was getting warmer, and I think it's a perfect warm weather book. I loved the setting. I ended up looking up some photos of where it takes place, and I want to go. It looks so beautiful, and I did love that aspect of this book. Otherwise, I thought it was good. I thought it could have been better, but I did enjoy it. And those are my reads for March and April. Like I said, not a whole lot of books, but I feel like I did enjoy the books that I read. I didn't really have any bad books, and I was in such a reading mood, which I absolutely love. Love it when that happens. And I'm excited for springtime reading and summer reading, and I think the warm weather just motivates me to read more, if that makes sense. All that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you later. All that being said, thank you guys for watching. Tots, guys.